Hi, I'm Lieutenant General Rebecca Martinez. When I came home for my sister's military promotion ceremony, my mother took one look at my dress uniform and laughed, telling everyone at the family barbecue that I was playing dress up and trying too hard to impress people with fake medals. What she didn't know was that I had just returned from a classified mission in Eastern Europe, and those fake medals included the Distinguished Service Cross and 3 Bronze Stars earned in combat zones she couldn't even pronounce.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
When my sister's commanding officer arrived and immediately snapped to attention, rendering the sharpest salute I'd ever seen while addressing me as General Martinez, my mother's laughter died in her throat, and our family finally learned that respect isn't something you give conditionally. It's something you earn through sacrifice they never bothered to understand.
Growing up in the Martinez household in San Antonio, Texas, meant understanding your place in a very specific pecking order. My father, Sergeant Major Carlos Martinez, had served 22 years in the Army before retiring to work as a defense contractor. Military discipline, honor, and service weren't just values in our house. They were the foundation of everything we did. Uniforms were pressed to perfection, beds were made with hospital corners, and dinner conversations often centered around Dad's deployment stories and his unwavering belief that military service was the highest calling a person could answer. My younger sister Elena had followed Dad's footsteps perfectly. She enlisted right out of high school, worked her way up to staff sergeant, and was now stationed at Fort Hood just 2 hours away. Every family gathering featured Elena and her crisp ACUs, recounting training exercises and deployment preparations, basking in Dad's obvious pride and Mom's constant attention. "My little soldier," Mom would coo, adjusting Elena's collar or brushing invisible lint from her uniform sleeve. I had taken a different path, one that my mother, Isabella Martinez, never quite understood or accepted. After graduating from West Point, an achievement that should have made any military family proud, I had been commissioned as a second lieutenant and quickly moved into intelligence work. The nature of my assignments meant I couldn't share details about my deployments, my missions, or even my exact location most of the time. While Elena could tell exciting stories about tank maneuvers and field exercises, my work involved classified briefings, international diplomacy, and operations that I literally couldn't discuss with anyone lacking proper security clearance. This secrecy had created a strange dynamic in our family. Mom had convinced herself that my reluctance to share war stories meant I wasn't doing anything important, that I was probably sitting behind a desk somewhere filing paperwork while Elena was doing the real military work. "Rebecca's always been too secretive," she would tell relatives at family gatherings. "Elena tells us everything about her service, but Rebecca acts like she's some kind of spy or something. It's probably just an excuse because she's embarrassed about having a boring desk job." Dad knew better, of course. As a retired sergeant major, he understood operational security and the nature of classified work. But he had always been conflict-averse when it came to Mom's opinions, preferring to let her say whatever made her happy rather than correct her misconceptions. This meant that family gatherings had become increasingly uncomfortable for me, with Mom making little digs about my mysterious career, while Elena received all the military recognition and respect I had earned, but couldn't openly claim. The irony was that I had risen through the ranks faster than anyone in our family's military history. Multiple combat deployments, advanced degrees in international relations and strategic intelligence, and a reputation for excellence that had caught the attention of Pentagon leadership had led to my promotion to Lieutenant General at 38 years old. I was one of the youngest female 3-star generals in Army history, commanding respect from international allies and overseeing operations that literally shaped global security policy. But I couldn't tell my family any of this. My promotion to general had happened during a classified ceremony at the Pentagon with no family members present due to security protocols. The missions I led in Afghanistan, Syria, and Eastern Europe were too sensitive to discuss even years after their completion. The medals I wore, the Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Stars and campaign ribbons represented actions that would remain classified for decades. This left me in the impossible position of being one of the most accomplished people in our family's military legacy, while appearing to be the least impressive to the people whose approval I still craved. Mom's constant comparisons to Elena, her dismissive attitude toward my service, and her obvious preference for my sister's more conventional military career had created a wound that deepened with every family gathering. The invitation to Elena's promotion ceremony had arrived 3 weeks earlier. She was being promoted to Sergeant First Class, a significant achievement that our family planned to celebrate with a backyard barbecue afterward. Dad was flying in from his latest contracting assignment in Germany, and extended family from across Texas was planning to attend. I had just returned from a 6-month classified assignment in Eastern Europe, exhausted but proud of work that had prevented a potential international crisis that the public would never know about. I was looking forward to a rare opportunity to spend time with family, to celebrate Elena's well-deserved promotion, and maybe find a way to bridge the growing distance between my mother and me.
I arrived at my parents' house in San Antonio the morning of Elena's promotion ceremony, wearing my dress blue uniform, the same one I had worn to Pentagon briefings and international diplomatic functions. The uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and medal positioned precisely according to Army regulations. My 3-star general insignia gleamed on my shoulders, and the weight of my decorations, earned through years of classified operations and combat leadership, felt heavier than usual as I prepared to face my family. Elena's ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Fort Hood, followed by the family barbecue at our childhood home. I had driven down from my temporary quarters at Fort Sam Houston, where I was completing a brief assignment between overseas postings. The familiar streets of my old neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered, lined with modest houses displaying yellow ribbon magnets and American flags that spoke to the military community's pride in service. Mom opened the front door before I could knock, taking one look at my uniform and immediately shaking her head with that expression of disapproval I had learned to dread. "Rebecca, really? You're wearing all of that?" she said, gesturing dismissively at my ribbons and medals. "Elena's ceremony is about her promotion, not about you trying to show off." The comment hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm. "These are regulation dress blues, Mom. This is what we wear to formal military ceremonies." "Elena never needs all those fancy ribbons to look professional," Mom continued, ushering me inside, where several early-arriving relatives were already gathered in the living room. "She looks like a real soldier without all the bells and whistles. This looks like you're playing dress-up." Uncle Miguel, Dad's younger brother, who had served briefly in the National Guard, looked up from his coffee and chuckled. "Isabella's right, Rebecca. That's a lot of hardware for someone who sits behind a desk all day. What did you do? Order those online?" The other relatives joined in the laughter, treating my decorations like costume jewelry rather than recognition of genuine service and sacrifice. Aunt Harmon, who had never served but considered herself an expert on military matters because Elena shared everything with the family, examined my uniform with theatrical skepticism. "I've never seen Elena wear anything like this. Are you sure those are real? Some of those ribbons look awfully fancy for someone who never talks about what they actually do in the Army." The assumption that my reluctance to discuss classified work meant I wasn't doing important work had become family gospel, and now they were openly questioning the legitimacy of my achievements. My Distinguished Service Cross, earned during a rescue operation in Afghanistan that I still couldn't discuss, was being dismissed as fake. My Bronze Stars, awarded for actions under enemy fire during operations that had saved countless civilian lives, were being treated like participation trophies. "Maybe tone it down a little bit," Mom suggested, straightening Elena's framed promotion orders on the mantel while pointedly avoiding eye contact with me. "Today is about celebrating Elena's hard work and real accomplishments. We don't want to take attention away from her big day." Dad arrived from the airport an hour later, still wearing his contractor polo shirt and looking uncomfortable as he took in the scene of his extended family openly mocking my military decorations. He knew better than anyone what my ribbons represented, but his lifetime pattern of avoiding conflict with Mom meant he simply nodded politely when she explained how she had asked me to dress more appropriately for Elena's special day. The drive to Fort Hood was torture. I sat in the back seat of Dad's truck while Mom rode shotgun, continuing her commentary about how I was trying too hard and making everything about myself.
Elena, who had ridden separately with her battle buddies, was waiting for us at the ceremony location looking confident and proud in her own dress uniform. Elena, Rebecca. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, she said when she saw me, her expression puzzled. Why are you wearing all that? This is just a sergeant first-class promotion, not the Medal of Honor ceremony. Even my sister, who should have understood military protocol better than our civilian relatives, had bought into Mom's narrative that my uniform was inappropriate and attention-seeking. Standing in the back row during Elena's promotion ceremony, watching my family beam with pride as she received her new rank insignia, I felt more isolated than I had during any of my overseas deployments. These were the people who should have understood the significance of my service, who should have recognized that my inability to share details about my work was a sign of its importance, not its irrelevance. Instead, they had spent the morning treating my legitimate military achievements like elaborate lies, dismissing decorations that represented genuine sacrifice and heroism as props in some kind of performance designed to outstage my sister.
The family barbecue that followed Elena's promotion ceremony turned into a public humiliation that I still replay in my mind during sleepless nights. Mom had invited not just our extended family, but also neighbors, Elena's army friends, and even some of Dad's old military contacts who happened to be in town. What should have been a celebration of Elena's achievement became a stage for Mom to broadcast her doubts about my military service to anyone who would listen. "Look at Rebecca over there," I heard Mom telling Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, gesturing toward where I stood near the grill talking with Dad's former sergeant major. "She's wearing more ribbons than a 5-star general. I keep telling her she doesn't need to exaggerate her service record to impress people, but she insists on wearing all that fake hardware." Elena's battle buddies, young soldiers who looked uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding around them, kept glancing at my uniform with confused expressions. They could read military decorations well enough to know that what I was wearing represented serious combat experience, but Mom's loud commentary was making them question what they were seeing. "I've never heard Rebecca talk about any deployments where she would have earned a Bronze Star," Mom continued to another group of neighbors, her voice carrying clearly across the backyard. "Elena tells us all about her training and her missions, but Rebecca's always secretive about everything. Makes you wonder what she's really hiding, doesn't it?" The conversation reached its peak when Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, one of Elena's mentors from Fort Hood, approached me with genuine curiosity about my ribbons. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I notice you have the Distinguished Service Cross. That's incredibly rare. What operation was that for?" Before I could explain that the details were classified, Mom materialized beside us with that knowing smile she wore when she thought she was exposing one of my lies. "Oh, Rebecca can't talk about her secret missions," she said with air quotes, rolling her eyes theatrically. "She's very mysterious about her desk job. Those ribbons are probably just for a participation or attendance or something like that." Sergeant Rodriguez's face went through a series of expressions as he processed what Mom was saying. The Distinguished Service Cross is the second highest military decoration for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. Suggesting that someone would wear one for participation was like claiming someone had faked a Purple Heart. His discomfort was visible as he tried to navigate between respecting an elder and defending military protocol. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said carefully, "the DSC isn't awarded for participation. It's only given for extraordinary heroism in combat against an armed enemy." But Mom waved him off dismissively, clearly convinced that she knew better than an active-duty soldier about military decorations. The humiliation deepened when Elena's commanding officer, Captain Morrison, arrived at the barbecue to congratulate Elena on her promotion. Mom immediately launched into her explanation of why I was overdressed for a family gathering, telling Captain Morrison that I had a tendency to exaggerate my military achievements to get attention. Captain Morrison listened politely, occasionally glancing at my uniform with an expression I couldn't quite read. When Mom finished her monologue about how Elena was the real soldier in the family,
He nodded diplomatically and moved on to congratulating Elena, but I could see him studying my ribbons with professional interest. The worst moment came when Mom gathered everyone around for photos of Elena in her new rank insignia. "Rebecca, maybe stand in the back," she suggested loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We don't want your costume jewelry distracting from Elena's real accomplishments." The laughter that followed from our relatives felt like knives, each chuckle a reminder that my own family had no faith in my integrity or achievements. Uncle Miguel raised his beer and announced, "Here's to Elena, the real military hero in the Martinez family." The toast was enthusiastic, with everyone raising their drinks while pointedly avoiding eye contact with me. I stood there in my dress blues, decorated with ribbons representing actions that had saved lives and prevented international incidents, being treated like a fraud by the people who should have trusted me most. Dad remained silent throughout the entire ordeal, sipping his beer and avoiding confrontation while his wife publicly questioned our daughter's honor and service. His failure to defend me hurt almost as much as Mom's attacks because he knew exactly what my decorations meant and chose to say nothing rather than challenge her misconceptions.
I left the barbecue early, claiming I had to return to Fort Sam Houston for evening duties. The truth was that I couldn't stand another minute of watching my family treat my military decorations like elaborate lies while celebrating Elena's legitimate but far less significant achievement. Driving back to base through the Texas Hill Country, I kept replaying Mom's words: fake hardware, costume jewelry, playing dress-up. Each phrase burned deeper than enemy fire I had faced in actual combat zones. Back in my temporary quarters, I sat on my narrow military cot, still wearing my dress blues, staring at myself in the mirror mounted on the opposite wall. The woman looking back at me had led multinational forces in classified operations, had been personally briefed by the Secretary of Defense, had earned the respect of generals and world leaders whose names would never appear in any public record of her service. Yet her own mother had spent the afternoon convincing extended family that she was a fraud. For the first time in my military career, I called my aide-de-camp, Major Patricia Williams, on a Saturday evening. "Major Williams," I said when she answered, "I need you to prepare a complete service record summary for civilian review. Include everything that isn't classified, with security clearance levels noted for the information I can't share." "Ma'am?" Major Williams sounded confused. "Is this for a background investigation or promotion review?" "It's for my family," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "They don't believe my decorations are legitimate." There was a long pause before Major Williams responded. "General Martinez, with respect, anyone who questions your service record is either misinformed or willfully ignorant. Your combat leadership in Afghanistan saved hundreds of lives. Your strategic work in Syria prevented a regional war. The intelligence operation you led in Eastern Europe last year literally changed the course of NATO policy." Hearing my achievements summarized by someone who had access to my classified files was both validating and heartbreaking. Major Williams knew details about my service that I could never share with my own family, operations that had shaped international relations and saved countless lives. Yet Mom dismissed it all as attention-seeking behavior. "Major, I want you to contact Captain Morrison at Fort Hood. He was at my sister's promotion ceremony today, and I believe he may have questions about my service record. Provide him with whatever information you can share at his clearance level." "Roger that, ma'am. Anything else?" I looked at my reflection again, at the 3 stars on my shoulders that represented a level of responsibility and achievement that fewer than a dozen women in Army history had reached. "Actually, yes. I want you to arrange for my official Pentagon portrait to be sent to Captain Morrison as well, the one from my promotion ceremony." After ending the call, I did something I hadn't done since West Point. I cried in my uniform. Not from sadness, but from a strange mixture of grief and determination.
I was grieving for the daughter who had spent 38 years seeking her mother's approval and respect. That daughter was gone now, replaced by someone who understood that respect couldn't be begged for or earned through family loyalty. It had to be demanded. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from Captain Morrison. "General Martinez," he said, and I could hear the shock in his voice, "I owe you a profound apology. I've spent the evening reviewing your service record with your aide-de-camp, and I had no idea who I was speaking with yesterday. Your mother's comments about your decorations were uninformed," I finished for him. "Captain, my family doesn't have security clearance to understand the nature of my work, but that doesn't excuse their assumption that my inability to share classified information means I'm lying about my service. Ma'am, I'd like your permission to attend this afternoon's family gathering. Your sister mentioned there would be another celebration today, and I think there are some misconceptions that need to be corrected." For the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. "Permission granted, Captain. I think it's time my family learned the difference between classified and fake." That afternoon, as I prepared to return to my parents' house, I made a decision that would change my relationship with my family forever. I was done being ashamed of achievements I couldn't discuss. I was done accepting disrespect from people who should have trusted my integrity. Most importantly, I was done allowing my mother's ignorance about military protocol to define how our family viewed my service. I was a lieutenant general in the United States Army, and it was time my family learned what that actually meant.
The morning of my return to face my family, I met with Major Williams at Fort Sam Houston to review what information could be shared with Captain Morrison and, by extension, my family. The classified nature of most of my work meant that the full scope of my achievements would remain hidden, but there was enough unclassified information to paint a clear picture of my actual service record. "Ma'am," Major Williams said, spreading documents across the conference table, "I've prepared a summary that Captain Morrison can share without violating security protocols. Your promotion timeline, your awards citations that are publicly available, and your current command responsibilities that aren't classified." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "General, I have to ask, how did your family come to believe that your decorations were fake?" The question forced me to confront the painful truth about our family dynamics. "They don't understand why I can't discuss my work," I explained. "My sister shares everything about her conventional infantry career, but I've spent 15 years in intelligence and special operations. My mother has convinced herself that secrecy means I'm hiding the fact that I have an unimportant desk job." Major Williams, a career officer who understood military culture, looked genuinely shocked. "General, your command of the 82nd Intelligence Brigade is hardly a desk job. Your combat deployments are legendary among intelligence officers. The operation you led in Afghanistan is still studied at the War College." I appreciated her validation, but it highlighted how isolated I had become from my own family. The people I served with understood my contributions to national security, while the people who raised me treated my achievements like elaborate fiction. Captain Morrison arrived at Fort Sam Houston an hour later, bringing with him Elena's first sergeant, a grizzled combat veteran named Rodriguez, who had served multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Both men's expressions were serious as they entered the briefing room where Major Williams had prepared her presentation. "General Martinez," Captain Morrison began formally, "I want to apologize again for yesterday's confusion. After reviewing your service record with Major Williams, I understand that I was witnessing something highly inappropriate at your family gathering." First Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been quietly studying the documents Major Williams had prepared, looked up with an expression of barely controlled anger. "Ma'am, with respect, what happened yesterday was more than inappropriate. Questioning the legitimacy of your decorations, especially your Distinguished Service Cross, is an insult to every soldier who has served under fire. That your own mother would do this—" "First Sergeant," I interrupted gently, "my family doesn't understand military protocol or classification levels. They're not being malicious, just ignorant." "General, ignorance is one thing," Captain Morrison said firmly,
But publicly humiliating a three-star general while she's wearing her dress blues crosses a line that goes beyond family dynamics. You represent the Army, and disrespecting you in uniform disrespects the service itself. The conversation continued for another hour, with Captain Morrison and First Sergeant Rodriguez asking detailed questions about how they should handle the situation at today's family gathering. Both men were clearly disturbed by what they had witnessed and felt a professional obligation to correct the record. "Ma'am," First Sergeant Rodriguez said as we concluded the meeting, "I've served under general officers before, but I've never seen one treated with such disrespect by their own family. With your permission, I'd like to attend today's gathering in dress uniform to show proper respect for your rank and service." I was touched by their support, but also apprehensive about turning a family barbecue into a military demonstration. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but I don't want to overwhelm my family with formal protocol they don't understand." Captain Morrison exchanged a look with First Sergeant Rodriguez before responding. "General, with respect, your family needs to understand that their behavior yesterday was unacceptable, not just as your relatives, but as Americans who benefit from the security you've helped provide. Sometimes education requires a demonstration." The plan we developed was simple but effective. Captain Morrison would arrive at the family gathering in dress uniform, accompanied by First Sergeant Rodriguez and Sergeant First Class Jackson, another of Elena's respected NCOs. They would pay their respects to Elena's promotion, but would also demonstrate proper military courtesy toward my rank and service. The goal isn't to embarrass your family. It's to show them what appropriate respect looks like when addressing a lieutenant general. Maybe seeing how other soldiers treat you will help them understand their mistake. As I prepared to return to my parents' house that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my promotion to general rank: confidence that my military achievements would finally receive the recognition they deserved, at least from the soldiers who understood their significance.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant General Rebecca Martinez. When I came home for my sister's military promotion ceremony, my mother took one look at my dress uniform and laughed, telling everyone at the family barbecue that I was playing dress up and trying too hard to impress people with fake medals. What she didn't know was that I had just returned from a classified mission in Eastern Europe, and those fake medals included the Distinguished Service Cross and 3 Bronze Stars earned in combat zones she couldn't even pronounce. When my sister's commanding officer arrived and immediately snapped to attention, rendering the sharpest salute I'd ever seen while addressing me as General Martinez, my mother's laughter died in her throat, and our family finally learned that respect isn't something you give conditionally. It's something you earn through sacrifice they never bothered to understand. The transformation in my family's behavior was immediate and profound. Uncle Miguel, who had been making jokes about my participation trophies just minutes earlier, stood at rigid attention when Captain Morrison introduced me as one of the youngest 3-star generals in Army history. Aunt Carmen, who had questioned whether my ribbons were real, was now staring at the Distinguished Service Cross on my chest with something approaching reverence. "General Martinez," Sergeant First Class Jackson said, stepping forward to render his salute, "my unit studied your tactical innovations at the Advanced Leadership course. The Kandahar extraction you commanded saved 37 soldiers and is now taught as a case study in combat leadership." Elena, still processing the reality that her older sister outranked everyone she had ever served with, approached me hesitantly. "Rebecca, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell us you were a general?" "I tried," I replied simply, "but every time I couldn't discuss operational details, the family assumed I was hiding an unimportant desk job instead of classified combat operations." Mom had remained silent since Captain Morrison's revelation, but now she stood and walked towards me with tears streaming down her face. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." Her voice broke as the weight of her public humiliation campaign finally hit her. Dad stepped beside Mom, his own military background making him acutely aware of how badly they had failed to support their daughter's service. "Sweetheart,
can you forgive us? We should have trusted you, should have understood that your secrecy meant your work was important, not irrelevant. Captain Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically. If I may, General Martinez's achievements extend far beyond what we can discuss today. Her strategic planning prevented conflicts that the public will never know about. Her leadership under fire saved lives across multiple theaters of operation. The Army has recognized her service with some of its highest honors. First Sergeant Rodriguez nodded gravely. Ma'am, the soldiers who served under your command in Afghanistan still talk about your leadership. You brought everyone home when other commanders might have written off casualties as acceptable losses. The patio fell silent as my extended family absorbed the reality of who I actually was and what I had accomplished, while they spent years dismissing my service as elaborate pretense. Uncle Miguel set down his beer and approached me with genuine shame in his expression. Rebecca, I owe you an apology that I can never make big enough. What we did yesterday, questioning your honor and your service, was unforgivable. You're a hero, and we treated you like a fraud. The formal recognition continued for another 20 minutes, with each of Elena's soldiers sharing brief, unclassified stories about my reputation in the Army. By the time they finished, my family understood that the daughter and sister they had been mocking was actually one of the most respected general officers in the military. As Captain Morrison and his NCOs prepared to leave, he turned to address the entire family one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, you should be extraordinarily proud of Lieutenant General Martinez. Her service has literally shaped international security policy and saved countless lives. She represents the very best of what military leadership can achieve. After they departed, the backyard barbecue resumed, but everything had changed. The conversation now centered on my achievements rather than Elena's promotion, though she handled the shift with grace and genuine pride in her older sister's accomplishments. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly respected by my own family.
3 days after the confrontation at the family barbecue, I received a call from my Pentagon liaison, Colonel Sarah Chen, with information that would complete my family's understanding of what they had been dismissing for years. General Martinez, she said, her voice carrying the excitement of someone with significant news. The Classification Review Board has approved the release of additional information about Operation Nightfall. The Secretary of Defense wants to use your leadership during that mission as a case study for the War College. Operation Nightfall had been my most significant command in Afghanistan, a rescue operation that had saved 37 American soldiers and over 200 Afghan civilians from a Taliban compound near Kandahar. The mission had been so sensitive that even its existence had been classified for 3 years, let alone the details of how we had executed what military historians were now calling one of the most successful special operations of the Afghan conflict. Colonel, I said, what level of declassification are we talking about? My family still doesn't understand the scope of my service record. General, the Pentagon wants to nominate you for the Presidential Medal of Freedom based on your combined service record. The White House is requesting a comprehensive review of your career achievements for the nomination package. Operation Nightfall is just the beginning. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my mother had been telling relatives that I wore fake medals and worked a desk job, the Pentagon was preparing to recommend me for the nation's highest civilian honor for military service. The gap between my family's perception and reality was even wider than I had imagined. Colonel Chen continued with details that made my head spin. Your strategic planning for the Syrian operation prevented what our analysts believe would have become a regional war involving Turkey, Iran, and Russia. The intelligence network you established in Eastern Europe provided critical information that influenced NATO's response to recent Russian aggression. General, your service hasn't just been distinguished, it's been historically significant. When I shared this information with Elena during a private phone call that evening, her response was immediate and emotional. Rebecca, I need to apologize, not just for yesterday, but for years of not defending you when Mom questioned your service. I'm a staff sergeant, and I should have known that your secrecy meant your work was important, not fake.
The deeper revelations continued when Colonel Chen sent me the preliminary citation for the Presidential Medal of Freedom nomination. Reading my own service records summarized by Pentagon historians was surreal. Lieutenant General Rebecca Martinez demonstrated extraordinary leadership across multiple theaters of operation, conducting classified missions that prevented international conflicts and saved thousands of lives. Her tactical innovations have been incorporated into military doctrine, and her strategic thinking has influenced American foreign policy at the highest levels. Dad called me that evening after Elena had shared the news about my potential Medal of Freedom nomination. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. "Rebecca, I've been in the military community for 40 years, and I've never known anyone nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Your mother and I didn't just misunderstand your service, we failed to recognize that we were living with a military legend." The Pentagon's Public Affairs Office reached out the following week with a request that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "General Martinez," the officer explained, "we'd like to arrange for a hometown hero recognition ceremony in San Antonio. Your service record is being partially declassified as part of a broader Defense Department initiative to highlight successful military leadership. Would your family be interested in participating?" After years of hiding my achievements behind classification levels and operational security requirements, the military was finally ready to publicly acknowledge some of what I had accomplished. My family, who had spent years mocking decorations they thought were fake, would now witness the Pentagon officially celebrating my service in front of our entire community. The transformation from fake medals to potential Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient had taken less than a week, but the impact on my family's understanding of my worth would last forever.
The Pentagon's Hometown Hero ceremony took place 6 weeks later at the Majestic Theater in downtown San Antonio, with over 800 community members in attendance. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, both wearing their formal attire, and expressions of profound pride mixed with lingering shame for their years of misunderstanding. Colonel Chen presented my service record to the audience, detailing operations that had been recently declassified specifically for this event. Lieutenant General Martinez's leadership during Operation Nightfall resulted in 0 American casualties while successfully extracting 37 soldiers from enemy territory, she announced to sustained applause from the crowd that included many local veterans who understood the significance of such an achievement. Elena, now fully comprehending the gap between her staff sergeant rank and my 3-star general status, gave a speech about learning to recognize excellence even when it couldn't be openly discussed. "My sister taught me that true military service sometimes requires years of silence about your greatest achievements," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the theater's sound system. The ceremony's most powerful moment came when Mom was invited to speak about having a daughter in military leadership. Standing at the podium where she had once publicly questioned my decorations, she addressed the community with raw honesty about her failure to support my service. "I spent years doubting my daughter's achievements because I didn't understand that her inability to share details about her work was a sign of its importance, not its irrelevance," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Rebecca Martinez is not just my daughter, she's a national hero who deserves recognition that I failed to give her for far too long." The Presidential Medal of Freedom nomination was submitted the following month, with my family's full support and understanding of what it represented. Dad, drawing on his own military experience, became one of my strongest advocates, speaking to local media about the pride of having a daughter whose service had influenced international security policy. Uncle Miguel and the extended family members who had mocked my fake medals were now among my most vocal supporters in the community, sharing stories about their relative who had become one of the Army's most decorated general officers. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the secretive daughter whose career they questioned, but the family's greatest source of pride and proof that military service could achieve heights they had never imagined possible.
2 years have passed since that transformative family barbecue, and I'm writing this from my office at the Pentagon, where I now serve as Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence. The Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony at the White House 6 months ago marked not just recognition of my military service, but the complete healing of my relationship with my family. Mom has become one of my strongest advocates, speaking regularly at military family support groups about the importance of trusting your service members' integrity, even when you can't understand the details of their work. I spent years questioning my daughter's achievements because I didn't recognize that secrecy meant importance, not irrelevance, she tells other military families. Her transformation from skeptic to supporter has been remarkable to witness. Ilana was promoted to Sergeant First Class last month, and our relationship has evolved into genuine mutual respect rather than the competitive dynamic that once defined our interactions. She often seeks my advice on military career decisions, and I've learned to appreciate her conventional infantry experience as much as she now respects my intelligence background. Having a 3-star general as a sister is intimidating, she jokes, but having Rebecca as a mentor is invaluable. Dad has returned to his role as the family's military historian, but now his stories include my achievements alongside his own service record. He's written a detailed account of our family's military legacy for the local veterans organization, dedicating several pages to operations I led that have since been declassified. The pride in his voice when he introduces me as Lieutenant General Martinez erases years of disappointment about his previous silence. The broader family dynamics have shifted as well. Uncle Miguel and the relatives who once mocked my decorations now treat me with a respect that sometimes feels excessive, but their sincerity is evident. They've learned that questioning a service member's integrity without understanding military protocol can cause lasting damage to family relationships. My work at the Pentagon continues to influence international security policy, but now my family understands and supports the demands of classified service. They've learned to take pride in achievements they can't fully comprehend, trusting that my inability to share details reflects the significance of the work rather than its absence. The lesson that emerged from our family's journey is simple but profound. Respect isn't something you have to fight for from the people who claim to love you. True family support means trusting someone's integrity, even when you don't understand their choices, believing in their achievements even when you can't see all the evidence, and recognizing that love sometimes requires faith in the person you raised. Looking back, I realized that my family's initial skepticism wasn't really about military decorations or career achievements. It was about their failure to trust the character they had helped shape, to believe that the daughter they raised would grow into someone worthy of genuine respect and recognition. Now, when I wear my dress uniform to family gatherings, it represents not just my military service, but the hard-won understanding that some battles are worth fighting, especially when they're about demanding the respect you've earned through years of sacrifice and service that others may never fully comprehend.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.